My name is Christy Kantorski. I am a director at the Bordentown Historical Society, and I am the creator of Harrowing History.
I'm Jim Parker. I'm an actor, and I'm a member of the Historical Society.
I'm Doug Kiofsky. I'm the vice president of the Bordentown Historical Society.
My name is Leanne. I'm one of the storytellers of Harrowing History, as well as a member of the Bordentown Historical Society.
Basically, this project started in early of 2019, and it was never initially intended to be a project. It was Doug Kiofsky actually was doing research on untold stories, and in doing the research, he pulled a file that was in basically the back of a filing cabinet of these old cutout newspaper articles about sinister occurrences that happened right here in Bordentown. And he showed it to me, and of course it piqued my curiosity, so I started digging into those actual events. These were murders, tragedies, stories you don't generally hear about in your local history. So in doing the research, I started pulling more and more and more similar occurrences throughout 100 years. And I started going, well, what could we do with this? There's a lot here, not just in the actual occurrences of the events, but in what these stories were telling. They're actually telling you a lot about the culture at the time, what people were living through, what life was like in a local small town. These are the stories that you're not taught in school. You're not taught these anywhere. And in speaking to the public, to people who are not necessarily members, they were interested. They're like, well, I want to know more. So we couldn't let that go, and I started developing these. It was initially intended as a walking tour, but given COVID, we've kind of had to shift and adjust things. It became a storytelling performance where not only are we giving you and telling you these stories, we're giving you a performance along with it. So it's an innovative, creative way of telling the story, which was something that's not commonly done. Actually, it was a rather kind of close-knit family. I worked alongside Doug, alongside the co-president at the time, Tim Rollander. Of course, my tellers had free reign. I built the stories for them, and I gave them the stories. It was up to each individual teller in how to tell that story. The only restriction was the facts must remain the same. We didn't change any of the historical information. It's how they presented it, who their character was in telling it. That was up to them. We worked alongside, at that time, it was Divine Word Properties, which enabled us to perform on what was the former Point Breeze property. Generally, each season we do 6 different stories. My favorite story actually will be revealed this season. It's the murder of Lizzie Holloway, which to this day is actually a cold case murder. It's never been solved, and there were a lot of potential people who could have been the killer. In doing the research, what fascinated me the most was the further you dug, the more potentials that could be found. So it's the research process that was interesting for me for that one. But it's also the historical connections to these stories. It's not just, in Lizzie Holloway's case, the murder. It's the influence of the train that was here and all the potential that that created, which has shifted over the years. I mean, now your common transportation is the automobile. It's no longer, the train still exists, but the importance wasn't on it. Whereas you see that throughout these stories. It's little elements like that that you pull out. Actually, we put a call out in a newspaper about, I'm going to say it was like 6 months before we started rehearsing these stories, for a call for people who wanted to be a storyteller. And that's kind of how we got all of the storytellers, is they saw the articles in newspapers and they reached out to us and said, hey, I'm interested. I met with them one-on-one to get a feel of their background and where they were coming from, and that's kind of how it came to be. We did pretty much all of the tales outside under a tent, so we could limit the amount of people for the restrictions at the time. Everyone was to wear masks, and it was actually a really different atmosphere to do it out. I mean, we had the electric, the old Edison bulb lighting and everything for effects, so it all drew together pretty nicely. And of course it was done in the fall, and we were very lucky the weather cooperated with us, so we never had to cancel a show. The feedback was great. We actually, after each performance, we sent out to the patrons, we sent out a survey for them to fill out. asking what their opinion was, what they liked, what they didn't like. The feedback was majority, I would say probably 85% purely positive. They wanted more stories. They loved the performance aspect of it. They basically said they've never seen their local history told in this way. And even some people who are long-standing residents of especially Bordentown said, my family's been here for 100 years. I don't know these stories. That to me was a huge success because I'm not actually local to Bordentown. While I've lived here several years, I'm not local. So for someone who's local to tell me, wow, you've done an incredible job with the history of this town, and you've told me something I don't know, and I enjoyed myself in a different way, that's a success. The second season of Harrowing History is following the same time frame as last year. We're doing it in the fall, and the first day will be September 18th. It's a Saturday in the evening. Actually, I was flabbergasted. I was extremely honored. I've spent, and I continue to do research on these stories now for, it's going on like 3 years. So it's a huge honor to me for an education award for this, because that was one of my ultimate goals, was to reach out to the public who generally, they wouldn't become a historical society member. Or this is your common person who goes, oh, I don't care, history, that's in books. I want to reach out to that person and show them there's more to history than what they think, and draw them in. And I think we successfully did that. We sold out in a week and a half for all the shows. And that's a great honor, and to be recognized for that is even better.
I have to say, I've never acted before. This is my first time. I own a business. So getting to become a character is pretty cool. And I learned a lot about the historical aspects. I told a story about the fires, and I learned about firefighting back before the turn of the century. So it was a fascinating, empowering experience for me. I think appreciating where we've come in the past 100, 150 years, 200 years, it's astounding how much we've progressed. And I think if we appreciate where we've come from, it gives us a better insight into where we may go in the future, and also I think a greater appreciation of what the community means.